And again, kind of putting together, we can help with putting together a report to help, again, manage that process along with helping to put together a scope on, where it is that you would like to see the HR area go. And that is it for my presentation. So I am now ready for questions.
Commissioner Ballard is first on the board with questions. Commissioner?
So I noticed on your website you have an ESG consulting component of your organization. So how does that impact your HR strategy with the companies that you work with, particularly local governments?
Yeah, so the ESG is new. So we actually do have a consulting team. It's brand new for Gallagher. And so when you think about, that component of it, right now we haven't kind of merged, a whole lot of synergy. I just actually did a presentation recently where a client was asking about ESG and diversity, equity, and inclusion because they were kind of starting down the path of ESG. So right now, personally for me, I can't speak to it, but I do have a consultant on my team that's kind of running that particular area that can speak a little bit more to how that can impact, the HR strategy.
Okay, and I also saw that you do have a big emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion. How does that impact your strategy as an HR practitioner and as a vendor for someone like the county?
Absolutely. So it is very critical. That's actually a new initiative where, even within my own practice area, we did bring in a managing director for diversity, equity, and inclusion because we knew that there was a need to do a lot of consulting for organizations, county, and private sector a lot. So one of the things that we have done is in everything that we do, so whether it's a handbook, whether it's your affirmative action plan, we kind of look through it through a diversity lens, if you will. And it could be, because a lot of times when you think about, DEI, and I'll just say it this way, a lot of times employers just kind of focus in on the recruitment side. They would say, we need to have a diverse pool of candidates. Well, DEI is in everything that you do, whether it is your compensation strategy, it is what programs and benefits that you're offering, the ability to, promote talent from within. So we actually, every aspect of what we do within the HR space, we actually do bring it and kind of look through it through a DEI lens.
And do you believe that it's important so do you actually do trainings, like internal trainings?
Absolutely. We do a lot of trainings.
And do you believe that the DEI is a really important thing to include in those trainings?
I do, because again, when we think about DEI, it's not just about race and gender. It can be about your skills, your experiences, the backgrounds that you're bringing to the table. So we don't focus in on just a protected category, whether it's, again, gender, religion, things of that nature. When we think about protected categories, we look at it through, all aspects of the individual, what they're bringing to the table, their work experiences, again, their skill set, things of that nature.
And going back to ESG a little bit, I also saw on your website that you have actually a metric where you're able to build ESG performance metrics into executive compensation that's packaged to ensure alignment and accountability. How does that work?
So I can definitely get you some information on that because the consultant who oversees that actually did communicate that within the last 2 weeks to a client of mine, which was very impressive because I had a client ask the exact same question. They wanted to do an ESG assessment. So we do that. I just don't have that information with me, but I can definitely make sure it's provided to the county.
I think those are the only questions I have at this moment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bearden is next on the board, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I just had a few questions in regards to, based on what kind of some of the comments that Commissioner Ballard asked, compensation strategy regarding DEI. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah. So when we think about there's potentially pay equity issues, so is there, something about the role that potentially could be impacting a person's ability to be fairly compensated. So that's when we think about DEI from that perspective. Again, not because of a person that's, a minority or things like that. We don't look at it from that perspective.
Can you go a little bit deeper in that?
Yeah, so when you have, you could have, let's just say you might have a driver and just use that as an example. And, maybe the driver is making, let's just say it's $10 an hour. But are we actually providing the right types of trainings and different tools and things of that nature to allow for that driver to progress into a higher tiered role or, gain some additional work experiences? Maybe they could become a supervisor or a team lead or a manager, things like that. So there could be certain hindrances internally that, again, not intentional, that could be putting together a structure in place that would prohibit a person from excelling to another role. Again, it's not about, the color of a person's skin. It's really about, how diverse are our programs? Are they inclusive? Can anyone, that might have the right skill set apply for the job or, be rewarded fairly? Or, are we providing the right training and resources to allow people to excel in those particular roles?
Can you give me an example what that might look like?
So let's just say, kind of going, maybe let's just think about a driver again. So, maybe this particular driver has come in as, very entry level, things like that. So what do you need to do to help this driver, feel like this is a very rewarding career? So maybe, when you think about the managers putting together some additional training initiatives, shadowing, mentoring type of programs to really help this person excel within or put together career paths and career tracks to show I don't like to use like driver 1, 2, 3, but I'm just going to use that from like career levels perspective. But if you do that, that is actually setting up a system in place that allows people to say, I don't have to just be a driver for 20 years. Maybe I can become a team lead. Maybe I can become a manager. Or you know what? Maybe I can progress out of this particular role. Maybe there's another role in transportation that I can actually be part of. So part of the DEI infrastructure would really start to look at some of those career tracks and career paths for some of those entry level positions to really kind of show this is where you're at today. But if you're thinking about you want to move, perhaps in this particular area, you can give them a picture of what that looks like and, part of the training or resources that they may have available to them.
So essentially, it's based on a training program that allows them to possibly get promoted? Is that what it is?
It's not always just about being promoted. You can actually foster and broaden the current skill set of people. So it's not always about, hey, I want to get into this role just to get promoted. It could be, literally about broadening the current skill set of the individuals to make that experience more rewarding, even as a driver.
Okay. You mentioned that, that there's not vendors that offer a one-stop solution. Can you explain that to me more in detail?
So when I say that they do not offer it, so again, you might have a vendor that says, we can handle all of your talent acquisition, right? And so what happens if you need a director, let's just say HR director for whatever reason, I'm just using HR just as a point here. They may say, well, we don't conduct executive searches. They might look at that as an executive search, if you will. So they may not, necessarily engage in that function, or they may not do a search for you at all. They may say, what applicant tracking system do you have today? We will post the job, and then they may or may not necessarily vet those candidates that apply to that job. They may just say, we'll post it, we'll send you resumes, but you, employer, you need to determine who you want to interview, who you extend an offer to, things like that, or may not even go through the screening process. And when you get to a final candidate, they may say, well, we're not set up to conduct background checks or drug screens, because they don't want necessarily that liability. Because what happens if someone has a negative hit that comes back, or, a positive drug screen? They may not necessarily want to take on that burden of saying no, if there is some kind of adverse, action that might need to take place.
So explain to me how it goes. Maybe you can explain this to me on how maybe an outside vendor might choose a position that is out for, that somebody can apply for. Like, how would Gallagher doing it based on, I guess, the culture of Gallagher? Like, how would they vet those resumes?
Yeah, so what Gallagher does, we do it more from an executive search perspective. So we actually have a practice that only focuses in on executive search, anyone at the director level and above. So that practice actually operates as like an executive search firm. So they actually have pools of candidates. They look at the industry, they look at the need, they draft the jobs, they vet all of the candidates, they interview, and then they communicate back. In this case, let's just say they communicate back to the county to say, here are, 3 candidates or 5 candidates we vetted. Here's all the specifics related to the qualifications and the experiences. And then once, the county would say we would like to move forward, they would take on, they being Gallagher, we would take on the rest of, extending the offer, things like that. They would, literally take that burden off of the county to do all of those activities.
Got it. And so, would you agree to the fact that there's probably not any organization that can offer any type of one-stop solution?
It depends on how you define one-stop solution, because not every organization really probably performs HR to the full extent it probably needs to be performed. So they may look at HR saying, hey, I just want to make sure compliance is done from, I need them to, conduct the I-9 process, make sure the leaves are taken care of, and explain our policies. So, a one-stop solution is going to look different for every organization. And so it's just going to be critical for the county to say, well, what is it that you really want and what the need is going to be in order to say, okay, vendor, can you do this?
So you also stated that vendor does not provide a comprehensive HR compliance advice. So my question to that would be, organizations such as ADP, Paychecks, these are some of the most largest organizations that I would say possibly in the world.
Yep.
They're doing a significant amount of, thousands and thousands and thousands of maybe not even that, maybe millions of employees at one time.
Yep.
So would a vendor like that not be able to provide the HR compliance advice to an organization?
So I've actually had experience because I worked with ADP's Total Source, which is an outsourced PEO, when I was internal working at a nonprofit organization that had already outsourced before they hired me. So one, I have kind of personal experience. Secondly, Gallagher has a relationship with ADP, so I have a lot of clients that utilize ADP as well. So ADP will very much so limit some of the information that they share, because again, they don't want to take on some of that liability. So they may say, well, what does your policy say? The law says this. You, employer, now go forward and make the decision on what it is that you need to do. So, again, definitely very familiar with some of these. They have to protect themselves. When you think about it at the end of the day. So it's not to say that they won't tell you what the law says. We do that. I do that myself, and I'll say from a best practice is this, but ultimately, decision is always going to fall back on the employer.
So you're saying that Gallagher would partner with somebody that does not provide a comprehensive HR compliance advice?
Correct.
Okay. So explain to me how vendor might experience significant staff turnover.
Yeah, so you might have a vendor that actually, let's just say they've assigned a team of 20 employees. They've given you their background, their credentials, things like that. But maybe, 2-3 months into the relationship, two of those folks left for another opportunity. Then, you might have another 2 or 3 people. So there's this constant transition. There's this constant bringing new people to the team, because then they still have to get up to speed on county policies, their contacts here at the county. So it's just that constant of onboarding again of those new folks and really understanding the culture, because that's going to be the big thing. It's not about, okay, here's their policies, I've got 50 clients and I'm just going to repeat back. So this is more than just serving as like a help desk. They have to be a part of the county. They have to appreciate what your culture is in order for employees to have the best experience from that relationship.
Got it. And here it says the vendor is not aligned around the organizational culture. So would you recommend that, based on the county and the way and the direction that we're moving this county, that we would possibly hire an HR firm that would align around our organizational culture?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to be critical, because you have to think about what it is that you're trying to solve for today when you think about HR. I mean, if there is a confidence or, lack of trust, and you want to have the best experience for your employees, you don't want it to go from bad to now worse, because now we've got, new people that we're supposed to be getting information from. We don't know, who our contacts are, or there's inconsistency with respect to how they're providing advice to us, things like that, or their times, they're only available from 8 to 5, maybe they're hours need to be a little bit longer, things like that. So you absolutely want a vendor that is going to really have an appreciation for your culture.
And do you believe that the county has essentially, I guess you can say, the DEI or the people that, strategy to move this county in the direction that we want it as the board?
Do I think that you're saying? Can you
Yeah,
repeat
so
that?
same thing as Commissioner Ballard was stating earlier. Do you believe that's the direction of the county of what we're trying to do as a board for the county, and to move it into that direction from
I
an
think
HR's
so.
perspective?
I do think so. But do you need support in it? Absolutely. Because I think any organizations, DEI is a journey. It is not something that's going to happen overnight. You can train on it. But again, you have to understand, what does it mean? Again, it's not just about, saying we need to have these programs that are specifically geared toward a specific population. It is not about that. It is really about giving access to every single employee, regardless of who they are, to have the best employee experience they possibly can.
Got it. And understanding that the vendor does not understand public sector / government regulations, I would assume that, there probably are some things in regards to rules and regulations. Can you maybe explain some of those to me,
Yeah.
that they might not have experience in that?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'll use the example of even an affirmative action plan. They may not understand the requirements there, that, if you are subject to federal contractor, requirements, that you have to have an affirmative action plan on site, and they may say, well, I don't know what to do with that. An EEO report, an equal opportunity, information report, they may understand, because private sector has to deal with that, so that wouldn't be something that's different. But what other types of requirements? There may be something at the government level, some kind of new hire reporting, something that needs to be submitted, different forms, whether it's background screening, things of that nature. Some of the audits, because I just can remember some of the audits and some of the, information that I had to, actually oversee when I was an internal HR practitioner at a public sector entity. There were a lot of government requirements that I had to really familiarize myself with, and sometimes there were monthly things that needed to be submitted on the HR side. You may have vendors that are not familiar with that.
Okay. So, in your opinion, since you're a consultant, what would we need? Say we did outsource HR, what would we need for an HR company to handle a large organization, in your opinion?
You got to understand where your current state is first. You really need to understand, what HR is doing today. Like I said, I was here last year. I have no idea from last year to today what's been happening, what's in place. So you need to understand, all of the things that are under the HR area and the current state of each one of those particular areas. So basically, you're going to map all of that stuff out. You have to really understand, like, if there are some gaps somewhere, you need to know where the gaps are at. So you have to start there. And then from that point on, how you want that HR vendor to manage those specific areas. So you have to be very, very clear. If you say, well, we have recruitment, but what does that look like? It's going to look very different, especially if you have collective bargaining agreements that might have some specifics around postings and where's to be posted and things like that. You have to be very clear in all of those requirements, because it's not about, okay, let's post on a common site like Indeed or, any other kind of very common job board that's out there. They may not necessarily, be well versed in that. And then if you have any kind of government reporting, systems, there are a ton of vendors out here that are, they use, there's one I'm blanking on right now. I know Kronos is one, but there's another one that's specific to applicant tracking that a lot of government entities will use. That vendor needs to be familiar with that particular system, so,
And I mean, if you were to grade, let's just say HR currently from a scale of A being the best to F being the worst, where would you currently grade us at currently today?
So I will totally do that. I'm always going to be honest when it comes to HR. So last year, I actually would say it was a D last year. I cannot speak to where it's at today because I have not been in communication with the team. I think you had a team that were committed, but they needed, there were some skill gaps, let me put it that way, because we were tasked to come in to do an assessment, but we also provided ad hoc HR advisory support because there were a lot. And we actually spent time for a couple months on a weekly and then bi-weekly basis, just running through the various HR challenges that were going on. But that ended, when you all had a new HR person come in, HR leader come in. So I would say last year was a D.
Okay. And do you believe that was just because of maybe what you guys stated was not executed?
Lack of leadership, lack of development in the area, because I think you all were without an HR leader for a significant period of time. I do feel as though just even talking with some leadership team members, some of those HR responsibilities, they probably felt like they had to take on themselves because they really weren't getting the support from the HR area.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Satcher, and then I'm on the board after Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
So can you walk me through, first of all, just your consulting contract with Manatee County, how that came about, and where we're at on that?
Yeah, so actually it was very interesting how Gallagher already currently partners with Manatee on the from a broker perspective on the employee benefit side. So we already had that particular relationship. We actually got a cold call that came in from the prior Chief Financial Officer, Jan Brewer, that reached out and wanted to conduct an HR assessment. And so we spent some time, her perception of HR at the time felt like it needed some help, needed to stabilize the area, knowing that there was an interim HR director, if you will, but had primarily been more of a recruiting manager, so probably not necessarily well-versed in all aspects of HR, probably just, an ability to keep the lights on. So that's kind of how we got to where we are.
Gotcha. And then as far as right now, what's your contract right now with Manatee County? Are you here, just pitching your services, or are you already consulting with us?
So we have an active contract, but we have not been consulting for months. Again, since the new HR director came on board, there was a thought that there wasn't a need since there was a new leader put in place.
And then I believe you mentioned during your presentation that you generally cater your services to your client.
Correct.
Now, does that usually include research regarding your client before you
Correct.
come on board, or as you continue to
Correct.
be on board?
Correct.
Okay. And then, so I guess speaking to that, or can you speak to what level of research was done on like the vision and policy of the board here, of our board here in Manatee County, that, our role is to set vision for the county and to set policy for the county?
Absolutely. So, part of my job, with any, opportunity to partner, I did spend a great deal of time kind of looking at your backgrounds, as specifically, being, judges, specifically kind of looking at some of the things that you do within the community outside of serving as a county commissioner. So that was very important. So I'm going to always do my homework in that respect, with that, because that really set me up to know, saying, okay, I know that there is a commitment from the board. They're not going to just say, hey, we want to outsource HR. So I felt as though you took that decision very seriously. Not to say other employers do not, but I think sometimes it can be a reactive decision in some cases. But I felt the level of engagement that each one of you have had, just kind of looking at your own individual backgrounds, told me that you have a very much vested interest in the county as a whole. The fact that, you're seeing, HR as a valuable area, a very critical area, and the decision to outsource, I took that very seriously. To say, okay, they're committed to this, and I have to do my own homework to, bring my A game here today.
So I hate to put you on the spot, or I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
okay.
All right, but just but you made me curious. Do
Yes.
you recall? Do you remember any of my background?
I couldn't tell you right this second.
Okay,
no.
that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I mean, if I researched 7 people, I wouldn't necessarily be able to answer a question that specific. Probably weeks later. So my background is mostly just in ministry. So done a lot of different things in consulting and some business but a lot of ministry and then a lot of missions work. So a lot of overseas missions work, generally based in the U.S., but going overseas.
Okay.
And including like after the earthquake in Haiti, just really my heart went out to the people there and what happened there, and for 7 years in and out of Haiti, and still have great friends there, and helping the group there. So that kind of, informs each step and thing that I do. But as I look at Gallagher and look at it online, I mean, and I guess everybody has a different way of looking at things, okay? But to me, like when I see that, you offer allyship training, right? So allyship training, can you explain to me what you see that as?
I
Make sure
cannot
I'm getting research right.
I'm more focused specifically on my HR consultant side. Like I said, Gallagher is a global organization, and they have, I would say, we have our hands in a lot of different pots. Not too many pots, but some might say it's a lot of different pots that we have our hands in, and we do have subject matter experts in those specific areas. I've traditionally have just kind of stuck within the HR consulting specific side of things. So, forgive me if I can't get into some of those areas.
Yeah, I think I could be wrong on which section I was on, and I won't take the time right now to check it, but I believe it was under one of the things that you offer, as HR consulting, which of course, like you said, big organization, could be different people in charge of different things. I understand. I feel like there's kind of a little bit of a disconnect here. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm pretty big on, people should be judged on the content of their character, and not the color of their skin. And I'm not, and I feel like DEI has been set up and pushed as a way to separate people rather than bring us together. And we are the United States of America. We are a melting pot. We are where people come together to do great things for each other and for the world. And if we start seeing ourselves as different and separate and, bringing and putting a magnifying glass on every single difference instead of looking at the things that bring us together that are way more significant, then I think we set ourselves up for failure and not for the progress that we're looking for, not to reach the goals. We may even agree on the goals, but how to get there, I think, is important. And so when I look and I see whole pages on, on climate, net zero and ESG and DEI and allyship training, where what I can tell is the goal is to make people admit white privilege and then look for that. And it says your first step is to admit it, and you're doing training for that in organizations. I just don't think somewhere along the way there's been a disconnect, because you said that you cater your services to who you're serving. I don't think we're looking for that. I don't think we agree on that. That doesn't mean that, we can't get, have lunch and have a great time and hang out in the evening. But I just don't see that this is the company that we need to be asking to consult us on how to move forward with the vision and the plan that we're looking for.
And I can respect that. I mean, again, I'm not here to say, you've got to do this because of, an individual. When I look at DEI, and again, I always say it from the perspective of everyone should be able to come to work and be able to be, judged, if you will, based off of their work performance and their individual contributions or their team contributions, period. That's how I position DEI. Now, you do have some employers that want to go down those paths that you might say that's not, Manatee County, and that's okay. That's why we call it more customized, because you do have some that are very specific and keen on that. So as Gallagher as a company, we have to be aware of that and sensitive to that, to say, we can do this, but if that is not what you're looking for, we don't push agendas on people to say, well, you need to be doing this because this is what, everything has been. No, that's not it. We understand kind of where you're at and what the needs are, and we customize based off of that. So that's where, I want to make sure you understand that.
Yeah, I understand, and I think I understand, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's part of being professional and working together. However, it seems like if we're bringing somebody in with one goal to help in this, in this area, that it would be a priority for us to find someone that looks at things similar. So I think that's where I'm coming from on this. So, but thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm next on the board. So I agree with Commissioner Satcher on a few of his comments. You're very good. I think you've come in here with a company that, as he said, is not really aligned well with the policies and the visions of this government. But you've done a great job of sort of tailoring this to our board, and I do appreciate that and our vision. So I'm going to agree with Commissioner Satcher on the DEI stuff and not delve into that very long. And I'm going to move sort of right along here. There are a few things in here. Well, let me just talk about my goals. My goal out of this for our employees is I want to create more stability. Okay. I want to create a higher level of service for our employees as well. We've had difficulty filling positions at times, which creates a problem it creates additional stress levels for the existing employees because we're shorthanded in a lot of these departments. And sometimes it's like, am I going to be able to take my summer vacation, right?
Right.
And so we want to get all these positions filled. Quicker response times from HR. I've heard those complaints from employees. Professionalism. And at one point in time, miscommunications apparently between the clerk's office and us, where paychecks weren't accurate. It was a one-time thing. but
Right.
it's happened as of, in the last 12 months. I also see benefits to taxpayers as well. And what I'm looking for there is I'm looking for cost savings, I'm looking for efficiency, I'm looking for smaller government.
Okay.
Okay, if we can achieve, those are the goals that personally I'm trying to achieve, and I think that the whole board is trying to achieve.
Okay.
The one-stop shop concept, I don't even want a one-stop shop. I feel like then I'm hiring like the Walmart of HR.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get everything at a lower level of service than I would otherwise. Just as an example to sort of dumb this down, we just hired a company called Manhattan to build our convention center. They're not one-stop shop. They're going to sub this out, right, to sort of specific industry experts all the way around. They're going to hire out an architect. They're going to hire out block layers and so on and so forth. Okay. And that's what I would just assume see somebody do. I think we need somebody to come in. I really prefer someone local who is invested in the community, that knows us, that knows the employees here, that knows the administration, and has to essentially face us. And you're a great company, and I appreciate that, but you're in Chicago, right? You're not really have to get held. Your administration doesn't really have to have their feet held to the fire the way a local company would, and so that's why I bring that up. You graded us at a D last year, and I asked you to be honest, and you were. Since then, we've gone from sort of lack of leadership. I think at this point we're essentially dealing with a leadership vacuum in HR, and that concerns me when it comes to the timeline of the procurement process, which is my biggest concern and has been for a while. And I was hoping that we would already be well into the procurement process at this point, and we're not. And instead, we haven't really officially started the procurement process, number one, and number two, we no longer have an HR director or a compensation manager as of last week, from my understanding. So things are not trending in the direction I was hoping. I was hoping HR was, essentially going to really step up their game and prove us wrong, and that was, would have been great. Doesn't seem to be trending that way at all. Seems to be trending the other way, and so now I'm concerned for 2,000 employees in this organization. So that's where I am at a level of concern. I don't know exactly how long the procurement process is going to take. I'm pretty positive it's going to take months and months to achieve that. I don't know that we have months and months, or that I feel that our employees are at least entitled to better than months and months before we reach that point. I would like to see the administrator bring someone in local and start working on outsourcing as much of HR as possible as a long-term solution, not a short-term solution. You did bring up long-term versus short-term solution. I prefer it be a long-term solution, back to the number one, stability under my goals for the employees. So I think it should be a long-term solution. And there are some things in here that I agree with a lot of your areas of functions that are generally maintained internally versus externally. There were a couple, like the employee customized handbook, manuals, and policies. You brought that up, but then you also said it was a deficiency of ours as well. So you said it should be maintained internally, but yet we're not doing it properly.
Yeah, because it hadn't been updated in quite some time.
Sure.
And even when I checked the website within the last week and a half, I think it was from 2015. So
Yeah.
I don't know if the new one has been updated at
Right.
all.
So, and I mean, I don't want to get too
Yeah.
super into. I'm getting further into the weeds than I want to. Put it that way. Because I also have your affirmative action plan as well. So that was something you said should be handled internally, but yet we're not doing it properly internally. So maybe we do need to go outside for that. And I agreed with pretty much everything you had on what should be outsourced. And there were a couple of things that I strongly agreed with you, like. Where were we here? Collective bargaining. Obviously, only the government, only the county should be doing that. We should not be outsourcing that at all. But I guess my direction for the administrator would be sooner than later. I don't think this is a knee-jerk reaction. This has been going on since we've got a D rating from last year, and things have deteriorated from that point. It's been a constant discussion amongst the board. We've even had employees come to board meetings with concerns to express concerns regarding HR and what's happening within their divisions. We have a specific division that is reaching a critical point, I believe, outside of HR, and I think HR could help that. And I don't want to see that snowball into other divisions as well. So that's why I'm not looking for knee-jerk reaction. I'm looking for bold action, and I'm looking for quick action on this. And I'm very concerned about the idea of putting it out to the full procurement process. I prefer the transparency of it. However, the timing, the timeline that it's going to require is a major concern of mine. And I don't know where the rest of the board stands on that, but I think that's the direction that administration needs today from us, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree with the chair on that, for sure.
Anybody else?
I'm sure that, we could find somebody here locally to be able to do it. I mean, this is the capital.
At one point, it was like the Silicon Valley of a lot of HR stuff, like back in the 80s and 90s. This place was.
So I'm sure that definitely we could definitely start, not hastily, but start moving in that direction to where, because
Yeah.
we definitely need to get something in place.
I really don't think it's in haste because, like I said, it's been ongoing for a long time. I mean, Commissioner Bosch, she and I don't always agree on things.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to put ego aside and say, you know what, she's been here a long time, she was right. And I think she was. And I anyway.
Yeah.